So real quick, I just want you to notice from last time that we talked about how if you placed a price ceiling at $10, the willingness to pay for consumers, for the amount of units being sold would actually be $12. And so this comes up a couple times in the top hat where it gives you a price ceiling, and it might say the price ceiling's at 10, and then it says, but at this price ceiling, what are consumers actually willing to pay? We would start from here because we know that 270 is the quantity in the market, right? And so we would say the consumers are actually willing to pay 12. So you can imagine that if we put a price ceiling really low, like down here, which reduced the amount being put on the market to a really small number, the amount people would be willing to pay would be very high, right? So what we're going to see in a sec is how if you place a really low price ceiling on something, it creates a very lucrative black market. So that leads us into Pear Deck here. So let's get started on that. Somebody do me a favor and close the back doors. Is that doable? I just hear people talking out there. It's kind of distracting. Oh, is it not? If it's not meant to close, that's fine. Okay, they left. Fair enough. Okay. Everybody got attendance? 2472. Okay. All right. Let's see. So the code's in the top right. How are? Oh my goodness. I really look forward to this class. You guys are so much nicer to me than my 8:30 class. I'm okay today. I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. I got vaccinated on Monday, my first dose. I'm happy about that. What's up? Yeah, I know some people because it evokes an immune response, but I haven't had any side effects at all. My arm was a little bit sore, but no real issues. My week is going well. If you sell things on the black market, you could afford rent. Yeah. Why'd I have to go an hour away? Because Maryland, so they just opened up the vaccine for any WVU student, but previously Maryland was like the only state in our area where they would give the vaccine to any higher education employee. So I'm a higher education employee. I couldn't, in PA, they don't allow that. You have to be like 65 or older, and same with here up until like today. So I was able to get it in Maryland because they were vaccinating higher education employees. I got the Moderna. I got the first shot of the Moderna vaccine. But yeah, my week's going well. Your question? What's that? Oh, for Pear Deck? Yeah, my bad. IIRWYG. Great. Yeah, my week's going well. I hope you're having a good week. I'm really happy that it's getting nice outside. That's really good for me. I can see more people are showing, the weather's nicer. It just makes everything better. All right. So before we talk about rent control, I want to talk about an interesting side effect of price ceilings. I'm going to show you part of this clip. Some of it's really vulgar, so I'm not going to show that part. But basically, well, hold on, settle down. It's okay. So basically, KFC gets banned in South Park. And a ban on something is equivalent to setting a price ceiling at $0. So we can kind of think of it the same way. You set this really low price ceiling, $0 basically. And what happens is a black market opens up where people are actually willing to spend a lot, right? Way more than the normal price. And so this is what happens. Okay, so, oh, no, not this part. That's where it gets kind of vulgar. All right. So basically, in economics, we understand that people respond to incentives, right? So you place a price ceiling on something. So in this case, a price ceiling of $0, literally banning this good, right? people respond to those incentives and they change their behavior. They're not always going to act exactly the way you want them to. So what crops up is a black market. And notice that the price in the black market is really high, because when we place that really low price floor on something that creates this massive shortage, some people are going to be willing to pay a very high premium to get that thing, right? Now, again, you don't need to write down everything on this slide because I'm just explaining the South Park episode. But the idea is that, just kind of reiterating a lot of the things we've been going over, right? Is that we can't always account for how people are going to react to different laws, right? And so prices are very high in black markets because supply is limited. A black market implies ultimately that there's some kind of shortage in the real world, right? And so people are willing to pay a lot. So it was $85 for those 3 pieces of popcorn chicken, right? If we made KFC illegal, you would see things like this happen, right? People selling stuff like this on eBay. I mean, I guess you can't do it with food, but this kind of stuff happens, right? Those Dr. Seuss books that got taken off the shelves, kind of relatively unknown Dr. Seuss books that no one was really reading anyway, but they had some offensive stereotypes in them. And so a controversy rose up out of them and stores started taking them off the shelves. And what do you see? They pop up on eBay for thousands of dollars, right? And so this is very predictable behavior if you use economic concepts to think about it. It's a collector's item. Yeah, it's now a collector's item because it's being pushed out of print. Absolutely. So segueing again, we're going to talk about rent control, which is a very popular type of price ceiling. Now, to be clear, there aren't really black markets in rent or housing, right? It's really hard to do that. But let's start with this. This guy ran for governor several years ago on the rent is too damn high ticket. It's his party that he created. Let's hear what he has to say.
Mr. McMillan, would you like 30 seconds more? Allow me to introduce myself. I represent the rent's too damn high party. People working 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, and some a third job. Women can't afford to take care of the children, feed the children breakfast, lunch, and dinner. My main job is to provide a roof over your head, food on the table, and money in your pocket. This is politics as usual. Playing the silly game. It's not going to happen. The rent too damn high movement. The people I'm here represent can't afford to pay their rent. They're being laid off right now as I speak. They can't eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Listen, someone's stomach, child stomach just growled. Did you hear it? Gotta listen like me. Okay. Let's talk about the issue. Mr. Cuomo, 30 seconds for you, sir. Rent.
So, ultimately, he makes good points, right? I mean, for a lot of people are struggling with their rent, especially in cities, right? As you probably know, Andrew Cuomo won that election. But yeah, so if he became mayor of New York City, I'm guessing he probably would have passed some rent controls, right? So rent control is a type of price ceiling placed on rental property, okay? And it has similar effects to other price ceilings. There are a few exceptions because you have to understand, right? Like, this is not the same as potato chips on the shelf, right? This is housing. This is something where people spend a year there or years there. They sign a contract, right? They live in a space for a year at a time. So you can imagine that the way rent controls interact with the market might be a little different than the way a price ceiling would interact with any other good, right? Because rent is a kind of different phenomenon, right? But there are some similar effects, okay? So, rent controls are rare. They're used in certain locations, certain cities. They're pretty rare. There are different kinds of rent control. Some are hard caps on prices. Some are ones that keep rent stable, where you're not allowed to raise it for a certain period of time. There are certain laws, even in West Virginia, where if you're raising the rent more than 5%, you have to give 30 days notice or something like that. All of these very broadly fall under the category of rent control. We're mainly going to talk about the more basic ones, okay, because this is an introductory course. So the gist of rent control is that it helps some tenants, but ultimately creates inefficiencies and reduces the quantity of housing that's provided, okay? Okay. So there's an important, so this slide, I see people writing, if there's a real important slide to really get down, it'll probably be this one, because this is where we're going to talk about like the theory straight from the textbook, okay? Straight from the textbook. So let's think about this. If you can understand this graph, hopefully you'll understand it in a minute or two. It's good to understand what this graph is doing, okay? This is straight from the textbook. So let's say, so the way rent controls often work is it's not that they won't always necessarily put a price ceiling above or below the current price of rent. Oftentimes, cities will place it at the current price, So let's say we're at demand curve 0 and supply curve 0. They intersect at E0, equilibrium. The price at that equilibrium is $500. 15,000 rental units are demanded. 15,000 rental units are supplied. Very basic introductory stuff here that we've already done, right? Just intersection of supply and demand. That horizontal line, though, is a ceiling. So now let's say the city planners say, okay, we don't want rent to go any higher. So we place a ceiling at what it's at right now. We place a ceiling at $500. Well, what's the problem with that? Now let's say a bunch of new people move into our town. We know that that's going to increase the demand for rental housing. So we're going to see the demand curve for housing shift right because of this influx of new people in our town. The equilibrium should go to E1. At E1, the price would be 600, and the equilibrium quantity would be about 17,000 housing units. We learned a week or two ago how the price mechanism helps coordinate people's actions. So this influx in people moving there pushes the price upward and incentivizes landlords, construction companies, etc., to provide more housing. But if the price is stuck at $500, then the price mechanism can't coordinate people's actions. It won't change the incentives like it should. The price should go up and incentivize more housing to respond to the need of the new people moving in. But if it's stuck at $500, that doesn't happen, and we end up with a shortage because now stuck at $500, 19,000 units are demanded, and just the original 15,000 from before are being supplied. And so we get a shortage of housing of 4,000 units. Yes.
So in general, you say whenever there's a price ceiling, it's going to shift the demand, right?
So the price ceiling itself doesn't shift the demand, right? It's that I'm saying they place a price, let's say they place a price ceiling and it's at equilibrium, but then over time, rents are going to rise because more people move into cities over time. So an influx of new people would normally, well, it increases demand. And normally that would just raise the price up to 600 and we'd get all those people housed because construction companies, landlords, the people who build and own places to live will be incentivized to provide more. But they're not if the price is stuck at 500. And so we've induced a shift in demand by saying, let's say a bunch of people start wanting to move into the city. Now they can't find housing.
That's practice where it says the excess demand before the.
Yeah.
Why is that not between the equilibrium price?
Excellent question. Excellent question. So the reason why the shortage is not the distance from E0 to E1 is because with this new increased demand, if the price is at 500, the quantity demanded is actually 19. Okay. So the quantity demanded at a price of $500, when we throw a bunch of new people into the city, the actual quantity demanded is 19,000. Whereas the quantity supplied stays at 15,000. If the price went up to 600, more on the margin, more housing would be provided, and some people would rethink their decision to move into the city. And so quantity supplied would be 17, quantity demanded would be 17. So the shortage, this is key here. The shortage is not the distance between quantity from one equilibrium to another. It is the distance between quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So we've moved to a new demand curve, D1. We're still on the original supply curve, S0. And the horizontal distance between those two at this price ceiling of 500 is 4,000. Yes,
So you say 19,000.
exactly. Because the price doesn't go up to incentivize more production, more construction, more housing. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Now, in the real world, things are, they follow theory pretty well, but, you want to look at, what does the research say? So, rent control is not always bad because it kind of depends on your goals. So it does prevent some level of community displacement. Now, again, this is a slide where you don't have to write all, I would say you probably don't have to write all this down. This slide is definitely more important. Just understanding this graph because it's straight from the textbook. But again, just to give you some context, like rent control, it prevents some level of community displacement, helps some low-income people stay housed, it protects some people from rent hikes, right? But there are a lot of negative effects, right? It's really not a fix-all, okay? So the quality of the housing may decline, right? If you can't charge as much, maybe you're going to pass some costs on to the tenants in other ways. Maybe you're less likely to spend money on maintenance. Maybe you're less likely to respond to a request about getting a plumber or something. So remember, these things change people's incentives. City planners might assume if we put a rent ceiling at $500, it's as simple as that. Landlords just charge less money. But the problem is you can't cover all your bases. They're going to find ways to cut costs in ways that they're allowed to do. So they might be forced to lower rent, but maybe instead of providing free electricity, they make you pay for it, right? So there are other ways that landlords might respond to this change in incentives and essentially pass the costs on. The biggest problem, okay, is that, if you're already in housing and it gets rent controlled, you may very well benefit. The people who are worst off are the new people trying to move into the town to find housing. And that's the biggest problem. Is that it becomes much harder for people who don't already live there to find a place to live. Any questions? Make it easier for what? Well, the thing is, the new people probably can't even find housing, right? But they could agree to other things. Maybe they get an apartment that's rent controlled, but it's falling apart, right? Because it hasn't been upkept. And so this is what we see happen in a lot of cases, right? Okay. Any questions? Is everybody following so far? Okay. All right, good stuff. Good stuff. So I'll throw up a text if anybody any questions about anything we just went over? So price ceilings placed below equilibrium create shortages, right? Rent controls might create shortages of housing when demand increases, prices can't coordinate properly. So yes, the shortage would be 4,000. Yes. Yes, exactly. It was 15 to 7. So we'll go the graph confused. Okay. Okay, so I'll go over it one more time, okay? Okay, so there's two demand curves because what we've done is we've shifted demand. We placed a price ceiling at $500 and now we've increased the demand because we're saying more people are moving into the town. Looking at the new demand curve, D1, if the price is 500, the quantity demanded is 19,000 units. But nothing has changed about the supply curve. For $500, suppliers are only willing to supply 15,000 units. So this price ceiling prevents us from moving up to this equilibrium at E1, where price is $600 and the amount of units provided is 17,000. We don't get there. The price ceiling keeps us stuck at $500, which keeps quantity supplied stuck at 15,000 units. And when demand increases from D0 to D1, instead of the price rising and us just moving to a new equilibrium, we're stuck at that price and we get a shortage because 19,000 people want housing, but only 15,000 units are available because of the price ceiling. Okay. All right. If you're still confused, shoot me an email. We can figure something out. There's also review sessions and whatnot throughout the week that you can always attend. Okay. Oh no. Hold up. Here we go. So this is kind of an exaggerated look at what might happen in under rent control.
Hey, no problem. This is amazing.
No, you're trying to afford it. Oh, yeah, this is what happens.
This three-floor walk-up?
And then 5-floor final. You got your harness, right? Oh. Shoot, which one is it? You know what? It's okay. This place is real easy to break into. You're gonna love it.
I'm sorry. The ad said there was a baby.
Ooh, yeah. Can't you just picture sitting on a Sunday morning reading the paper? The commute is a breeze. Ferry submarine to segue towards an H train which does not exist.
So you mentioned the building has a gym.
Yeah, he's right there.
Jim.
Oh,
You need to understand to talk to me. I mean, just imagine what it's gonna look like once it's renovated. And then just keep doing that for the entire time that you live there. Utilities are not included, so you will be responsible for gas, electric, hot water, cold water, air, and ceiling service.
what's ceiling service?
Just like we continue to have a ceiling.
Oh,
Good news is the apartment does come with Wi-Fi and very scary goods. There is a shared outdoor space,
fantastic.
section the sidewalk, so you'll be sharing it with pedestrians, dogs, cyclists, really anyone. It's the sidewalk. Of course, this is a bathroom railroad, so to get to the second bedroom, you do have to flush yourself down the toilet. Follow me.
No, there's no broker's fee, right?
Correct. There is, however, a broker's tax, broker's ties, and broker's tribute, which combines about 6 months rent plus give me whatever you have in your mind. As advertised, this is a half bath and quarter sink. This apartment has a doorman.
Great.
Oh, excuse me, that's wrong. It has a man door.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, not this one.
No.
Now, this is an all kitchen apartment. Pets are mandatory and the emergency sprinklers are always on.
You know what? I'll take it. I can't do this anymore.
Great, I'll just need a credit report, proof of employment, a birth certificate, and one of those Scientology stress tests, a certificate, and just one perfectly bad thing.
When do you need it? What?
Oh, I'm so sorry, you just read it.
You just can't wait to decorate.
So, this is kind of an exaggerated view, but this is, these are the kinds of things that might happen, right? If you pass well-intentioned rent control policies. Now, in the real world, things are a little bit more complex. City planners have gotten better at this. They understand that hard rent ceilings cause problems. they found other ways to, try to mitigate the negative effects. They'll do, okay, like you can't raise the price more than 5% per year, or maybe the government will just subsidize the housing a little. So, in the real world, things are a bit more complicated, and, economists have played a bigger role in informing policy in the past couple decades, more so than they did previously. But either way, I want you now to think, and so now we're getting into material. 9.2 is a very short section. So now we're moving on to stuff that I would say is more like bonus material. So I would say that something related to this would probably end up as an extra credit question on a quiz. But I want you to think, using everything you've learned, what do you think might be a solution to housing affordability in urban areas? What do you think a lot of economists have been rooting for in the past several years? So there's something kind of specific that economists have been proposing as an alternative to rent control to try to get prices to come down. So think about the things we've learned. What would be a way to bring the equilibrium price of housing down? What could we do? Whoa, what? Oh my goodness, what's going on here? A ceiling that correlates with square footage, have it based in groups such as, a price ceiling that correlates with square footage. Gotcha, interesting. But it's still a price ceiling. I mean, if it's below equilibrium, you still might get a shortage. But again, it is happening that they're trying to use price ceilings and price controls that are a bit more efficient because, we've gotten better at doing that kind of stuff. Go live in Kansas. Yeah, so you could go and live somewhere that's less densely populated. But of course, the problem is there's actually an advanced, if you ever take like an advanced econ class, it's one of the first models you learn for urban economics. It's called the monocentric city model. And basically what it predicts is that people cluster where the jobs are. So there are more jobs in more densely populated areas, and those areas are more densely populated because there are more jobs, right? So you can't always go live in Kansas. Okay, no price ceiling, let supply and demand do its thing. Sure, but prices are still going to be really high. Raise the price slowly. So this is what the current rent stabilization solution is for city planners, is they don't do a hard ceiling, but they control the rate at which rent might increase. Now, this one is the simplest answer and the one I'm actually looking for. What most economists recommend is that we build more housing. Now, why doesn't that happen? Why don't we build more housing? So this is kind of an interesting graphic. You may think about this in your own life, going through a city or maybe the area you live in. There seems to be this dichotomy where you either have single family homes, where a space that if you just stack it 10 stories high could fit hundreds of people, only fits 3 people, 5 people, right? And then you have the other one, which is the mid-rise apartments, where you put hundreds of people in them, right? Where's all the in between? So the idea is that there are these things called zoning laws. And what zoning laws do is they legislate what kind of buildings you can build in a certain area. So for example, the reason you don't build a house right next to Starbucks is because that land is commercial land. You're not allowed to build housing on it. Well, one of the problems with zoning laws is that lots of zones are slated for single family housing. If you make an area single family housing only, you're placing a price ceiling of $0 on any other kind of housing. If you can only build a single family home here, it's illegal for you to build an apartment complex. That's like a price ceiling of 0. So what do? We get a shortage of housing because of zoning laws. Now, why do these zoning laws exist? Because people don't want more housing being built. So this is kind of a modern conflict in urban planning and in the urban economics community. Urban economics is actually what I field in. It's what my research is in. And so, you know, I linked this article. You don't have to read it, but basically it's interesting because they talk about something I did not know. Now, Seattle is a city that has experimented with rent control, but 75% of the city is set aside for single-family homes. Big open spaces, the size of this classroom, where only 5 people are allowed to live. When you could really fit 100 apartment units. So what we see is a lot of people are pushing now for more development, build more housing. The problem is what we get called NIMBYism, not in my backyardism. Many people, if it turns out that, you know, they plan on building an apartment complex near me, I protest or I lobby the government so that they don't. We just make it illegal. Don't let them do it. Now, I'm not saying that it's bad to live in a single family home. I grew up in a single family home. I will probably live in a single family home at some point in my life. Everybody, you know, home ownership is definitely a goal, right? To strive toward. But the problem is with zoning laws, you know, people who would want to live in apartments aren't able to, because we have all this land that's set aside explicitly for a specific type of housing that only fits a few people. And so the economist's solution is roll back some of these zoning laws and let people build more housing. Let the supply increase. This is a market solution to a very serious problem that hurts a lot of people and keeps a lot of people in poverty. If we let more housing get built, the price of housing would fall drastically. Okay? So zoning laws prevent more housing units from being built. Cities then resort to rent control when they could just relax the zoning laws. Now, some zoning laws are there for good reasons. Maybe this area is some kind of, you know, it's a watershed and we don't want to put too much stuff there. Or, you know, there's some kind of environmental concern where we want to, you know, protect this land. But a lot of zoning laws exist because people in the area don't want lots of other people moving in. And sometimes construction companies, development companies will cut deals with local governments to prevent competition. Now, using what you've learned in the past few weeks, what word would you use to describe the supply of housing under zoning law restrictions? What word would we use to describe that? We would use a form of that. Yeah, exactly. Inelastic, exactly. So with zoning laws, a lot of times pushed by people who, the not in my backyard type people who don't want apartments being built near them. And I'm not trying to badmouth those people. I understand you might, you know, it's fine. That's what people want, then that's their preference. But ultimately, you know, we're passing laws that favor those people against the interests of all the other people who would love to have, you know, some more housing built that they could afford, right? And this is not, you know, so if you take a look, you know, think about 2 identical influxes of population into a city or an area. If you can build more housing easily, then the supply is relatively elastic and the price barely goes up. But if you can barely build more housing because of zoning laws, the price skyrockets. And the first thing city planners do is say, we have to put a cap on rents. So what I'm offering you today is the contemporary, research-backed economic solution to housing affordability, which is roll back some of these zoning laws, let people build more housing. Yeah. Okay, let's see. So any questions about that? Okay. Well then, in that vein, so our type 2 things you learned today. You know, if you're not going to draw something you learned, then at least draw something. I'll give you a sec. Anybody see any good movies lately? Yes? What movie? Is that in theaters? Wait, are theaters a thing? Oh, okay, nice. Are theaters even a thing right now? Can you go to a movie theater? Whoa. Interesting. Wow. Last movie I saw in a theater was Joker, like a year and a half ago. Anybody see Joker? I was a little bit underwhelmed. I think you should all watch Taxi Driver. That's a movie you should all see because that's kind of what it's based on. It's Robert De Niro when he was like 25 years old. It's considered like it's Leonardo DiCaprio's favorite movie. It's like every famous actor's favorite movie and like favorite role is Robert De Niro's role in Taxi Driver. Phenomenal film. Jodie Foster's first movie as well. Anyway, let's see what you drew. Okay. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, good. You can find the shortage. Okay. I got a lot of this at the 8:30 class. People just drawing homes versus apartments. Okay, yeah, the housing market is inelastic, oftentimes because of zoning laws. Build more houses, nice. Nice, very nice, thank you. Okay. All right. Yeah, good. Yeah, exactly. Excellent. Shortage. Excellent. By the way, this black markets don't work with housing is not like a particular point you need to know. It was just me trying to explain that I'm not trying to relate the two. I just needed to go over it real quick because I didn't get a chance to go over black markets in the last lecture. Using high rent control, negative impacts on rent control. Nice, nice. Politicians overthink economics. Well, I don't know if they overthink it. I think they don't think about it very much. Nice. What is this? Is this the peace symbol or is this like V for Vendetta?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay. All right. Excellent. Hello. This guy. Okay. Okay. Any questions? Any questions to wrap things up today? Friday, we're going to do some graphical stuff and it's kind of hard to, I wish I had a nice, this blackboard kind of sucks. Its angle is not very good. That's why I don't use it. I wish I had a nice big whiteboard, but Friday, I'll try to do some Pear Deck stuff, but we're also going to do some graphing and drawing. I'm going to be using the doc cam. All right. Okay, I'll check it out. Thank you for the recommendation. I recommend Taxi Driver. It's on Netflix, or maybe they might have taken it off Netflix. It may have only run for like a few months. Either way, have a nice day. I'll see you on Friday. You too.